We're here with Mike. Mike, you had an experience about, what, 4 years ago? Just
Yeah.
outside of Bloomfield, New Mexico?
Yes, sir, about 9 miles.
What happened there?
Well, I was just going out rock climbing and stuff, and I don't know, we have this camping spot now, but that was before I found it. There was a skull I found over there. It was just laying in the dirt, and my dad hunts. We have a big hunting family, and so I brought it back. He collects antlers and stuff, and I thought it was a coyote skull, and I showed it to him, and he told me it wasn't a coyote skull. He showed me one of the coyote skulls he had, and it was probably about, the one I found was about like that compared to a traditional coyote skull, which is a lot smaller, and just the whole thing was wrong. The way it was shaped and everything is definitely not a coyote.
How long would you put the skull? About 24 inches?
Yeah, maybe about 20 inches.
About 20 inches?
Yeah.
And you were talking about the canines that jutted up from the bottom jaw, but they weren't quite like hog tusks. They were just teeth.
They were teeth, definitely teeth.
Okay.
Yeah, well, where the top canines were, just in front of them, the jawline was like indented, where the teeth could slide up right in front of the top teeth.
So some really nice scissors.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Ouchie, ouch.
Canines were bigger than all the rest of it.
Now, when you found it, it still had some gray fur on it? Was it gray?
Yeah, it was like a darkish gray.
So there was probably some skin matter and some gray fur, and you were like curing it out in your front yard?
Well, it was pretty picked clean. There was only little tiny tidbits, but yeah, I left it in the front yard with a couple other bones and stuff. Just left it sitting there.
And some time went by, and you actually brought this skull inside your house.
Yeah. Well, I ended up putting it in my room up on top of my dresser, and it got to the point to where I didn't feel comfortable going into my room because it was just eerie, you know. But it was, I don't know, I decided to take it back out into the hills, just put it back where I found it. I have a bunch of friends that told me I'm not supposed to mess with bones I found out in the hills and stuff, so I thought I'd be respectful and go put it back. And I was coming back. Well, I went out just to go rock climbing and stuff again, and I set it down and went on about my business, and later on I went back home and it was back in my front yard again.
And how far away did you put this skull? Where did you put it?
It's
from your home.
It's about probably 2.7 miles.
Okay.
Almost.
And you left it out there with the intentions of leaving it there. You get home and it's back in your front yard.
Right where I had kept it.
Wow. And what did you feel at the time when you got back and saw the skull there?
Well, I was a little unnerved, but I thought, you know, there's a chance maybe my dad's playing a trick on me or one of my friends or something like that. So I got in my dad's truck because it was getting kind of late, and I drove back out to another place, and I got rid of it again.
How far?
Oh, this time I drove probably about 5 miles.
Okay.
I went way out there. And I came back. I didn't do anything else. I didn't have anything else to do. I just wanted to get rid of the skull. And I came back to my house in the truck, and when I pulled up, there I was, same place in the yard.
Did you walk a ways off the road to get rid of the skull? You didn't leave it like where anyone could see it?
No, I went off four-wheel and off of the road.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, off the edge of a bluff.
And then what happened next?
Well, it was too late, and I didn't want to mess with it anymore. And the next day I went to school and told one of my Native American friends, a real good friend of mine, Jordan, about it. And he told me that we needed to do some stuff, and we went out, and he told me that I was cursed by skinwalkers and that I needed to get rid of it, and he needed to help me with it.
So he would have been alluding that this skull was from an actual skinwalker? Is that what
He said it might have had something to do with the skinwalker.
Okay, okay.
Not necessarily one of them, but bones out in the hills is their deal, I guess.
Okay.
But we went out there. We went out with the intentions of camping, me and him and one of my other friends, and we went out there, and I've grown up here all my life, but he told me we needed a plant to do this with, and I had never heard of it. But we eventually found it. It was like a bluish green plant, kind of like sagebrush, but leafier. and we had strong winds, but he put it on top of the skull, and he's trying to light it on fire with a lighter. And I was thinking, you know, this ain't gonna work. But after a little while of trying, it amazed me because it goes up in this green flame. And
all at once, like
all
poof.
at once, just whoosh, like he had dumped gasoline over it.
Wow.
And he kind of nodded, and he stood up, and he starts shouting Navajo out in different directions and stuff. And I was you know, going white by this time, going, this is crazy, because the winds were really going, but it was like it didn't affect the fire at all. And he's speaking in Navajo and stuff, and then the fire dies down, and then it went out. And he told me, okay, now we're going to go camp, and in the morning we're going to come back and look, and if it's still here, you're okay. If it's not still here, you're pretty much screwed. And so I was nervous about it, but we went on. We camped and everything. And
didn't you get a pain in your neck at one time?
Yeah, that was when we were camping. We were camping just below a little, I don't know, maybe 15-foot little bluff rock. Kind of had an overhang we were camping inside of. And we heard something up on top walking around. And so I went up to see what it was. And I was standing up there, and I watched and looked around and sat down and listened for a while and just examining, you know, enjoying the countryside and seeing if there's any, I thought it was wildlife, maybe deer or something. And nothing happened, so I stood up, and he asked me from down there, he yelled to ask if I seen anything. I was all, no, I'm just going to come back down. I don't think there's anything up here. It was probably just a coyote or something. And it was crazy because he asked me that, and so I had turned and was looking at him, and I turned back as soon as I was done talking to him, and as soon as I turned, I felt like I got a bug bite back here. And I kind of, you know, swatted at it, and it stung, but I figured it was just like a bee or something, deer fly. And so I went down there, and a little while later it just started aching and kind of throbbing. And so I asked him to see if there's a stinger in my neck. I thought maybe it was a hornet or a wasp or something left a stinger in there. And he pulled out this little sliver of bone about 3/4 of an inch long. And I thought he was screwing with me, because he shows me, this is what was in your neck. And I was like, no way, you're messing with me. And he goes, no, I'm dead serious. And I could tell, look in his eyes and everything, he was serious. And he told me probably what happened was, it was up there watching me the whole time. Something was up there watching me, and they make weapons out of bones, and he thinks they threw it at me, like a dart or something, or shot it, I don't know. But
like through a blowgun. That sounds
yeah,
like a blowgun dart hitting you in the neck.
And he asked me when that happened, and I told him what happened, and he said, if you hadn't have turned, you might be dead. And so I got really freaked out, you know. And we stayed by the fire the rest of the night, and every time when we go out in the hills, we hear all kinds of crazy stuff out there. But we didn't mess with it. We just stayed by the fire because I was unnerved. I didn't want to die. I didn't want anything coming after me. And so we just stayed by the fire the rest of the night, ended up going to sleep. Next morning we woke up, and thankfully the skull was still there. It wasn't how we left it, but it was still there.
Did you see any animal tracks or anything coming in near your camp?
Not by the camp. On our way back, we were following the same trail that we took up there, and I was going off to look off the bluff and stuff, and coming back and going off and coming back, and one of those times I went off, I seen these tracks, and it was weird. It was like 3 toes in the front, kind of spread out like a bird, like a turkey or something, and something behind it, like not quite like a line, but.
How big would you put those tracks?
Oh, about like that.
About like that?
Yeah.
And how deep were the impressions, as far as you could tell?
They weren't deep because it was just rock with sand on it.
Just rock and sand, okay. Sounds interesting. Sounds a lot like one of our friends that we know who had a Wendigo dogman type sighting. Sounds a lot like the way he was describing the feet that it was standing on.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Very interesting. Well, dude, I'd like to thank you for your interview. Another question. When you got home, there was no skull.
Right.
Was there anything else that happened in regards to the skull?
Yes.
What happened?
Well, that's pretty much just the beginning. It's not a whole lot, but that's what started it. I left it I didn't touch it after that. I left it up there, and it was probably maybe a year and a half, something like that went by, and I had moved into Farmington with a roommate, and I was telling him the story, and he wanted to see it, and I told him, no, I'm not going out there. I'm not going to touch it. And he ended up talking me into it, so we drive out there, but the deal was I wasn't going to touch it. I told him if he wanted to touch it and screw himself over, that's fine, but I'm not going to touch it. And we went out there, and he decided he wanted to take it home. So he picked it up.
Oh, you're kidding.
He picked it up, put it in the back of the truck. I was pretty upset, but anyway, we went back to the house, and it didn't seem too bad. He left it on a coffee table, kind of like a centerpiece. But we'd have friends over and stuff, and after a while, it got to where like the skull would be sitting on the coffee table, and we'd be talking, and someone would point out that it was kind of eerie. It was like it was looking at us. So we'd turn it the other way, facing away from us. And 20 minutes later or so, we'd look back again, and it was looking at us. And that became more frequent and more frequent. And then we had a couple people actually say that out of the corner of their eye, they seen it lift up off the table and turn and set back down. We actually had one friend that came over one time, and when that happened, it unnerved him so bad that he left. He just up and left, didn't say anything. He said, this is too much, and left.
Now, with the skull, I think you were telling me it had some vertebrae directly below the skull, probably indicating, you know, an upright walking, bipedal type, something. Baboon, as you might. That's interesting. How much vertebrae was left inside the skull?
Well, there was, I guess the little knots are vertebrae.
Okay.
That there was about 2 of them.
Okay. But enough under the skull.
It may have went up into the skull, I don't know, but there was 2 of them sticking down.
And it was a pivot point, obviously, that it would sit on the shoulders of something that walked upright. I mean, not that we're experts in this field or anything, but I mean, that makes sense.
I did take it to a friend of mine, and his dad does taxidermy.
Okay.
And I showed it to him because I was flabbergasted trying to figure out what it was out in the hills. I'd never seen an animal like that, and not anything legit anyway. But he couldn't find anything. He said the closest it came to was a javelina pig, like a wild hog, except for it had teeth where tusks usually were, and it was the wrong shape, and the vertebrae came out the bottom instead of more towards the back.
In any great number that I know of. I think there's a few on Bullock's property, but they're fenced in. So, I mean, we don't have wandering javelina in this area. And the size of the skull, I used to hunt javelina. They're tiny little 40-pound things, you know. The size of the skull that you're talking about is, that would be a 600-pound javelina to have a skull that big. Basically, a javelina is a peccary, and they're not related to swine at all. Their closest relative is the hippopotamus. That's their closest relative. They're such a strange little creature.
Wow.
And they range pretty much the Arizona-New Mexico range in the southern parts of the state, and in Mexico and South America. And so, I mean, a javelina being here, and especially one of that size, would be very unusual.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know. A little description is normally where you have like a coyote skull, where the top of the skull comes and it curves down to the snout. This one didn't. It was bent kind of like a downward, but it was straight. It didn't have no bridge line where your eyebrows are. Didn't have any of that. It was just straight all the way down. And it had in between the 2 front on the top, there was no teeth left on the bottom in the front, but on the top, in between the 2 front canines, it had little tiny, about that long, maybe 1/4 of an inch wide, flat teeth. Little ones, like maybe for nibbling on leaves or something. I don't know.
Interesting. And so you take it to the taxidermist. He can't really determine what it is. What happens to the skull after that?
Well, I kept telling him we need to go take it back. Just leave it alone. Don't mess with it. Just go put it back, and hopefully it's not going to be there when we get back, you know. And he said, no, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And I was at work one day. And
At this time, it's in his house, or were you
yes,
sharing a house
well,
with
we
him?
were living together, yeah,
Okay.
roommates.
Okay.
But I went to work one day, and I came back, and the skull wasn't on the table, and so I figured it was just covered up somewhere or something like that. And I didn't ask him. I didn't end up asking him about it until the next morning. But I asked him, and what he told me was that he was there home alone, and it wouldn't stop moving. And it was really, really freaking him out. And so he smashed it up and threw it in the trash. And that was where we started not becoming as many friends. But he destroyed it.
What a crazy, crazy thing to happen to somebody. It's amazing. And we didn't have any further repercussions after smashing the skull. It went away to the city dump and was dumped, or we don't know.
I don't even know what trash can he put in, one of the outside ones, but he's always had weird stuff happening at his house, and it got worse when I moved in there, and I don't think it ever calmed down. And it could be in relation to the skull, it might not be, I don't know. But nothing happened to me.
I'm glad, because we wouldn't be talking to you right now.
Yeah.
Mike, thank you so much for your interview, brother, and I look forward to talking to you further. God bless you, man.
You too.